Good evening, I'm Stacey Russell and welcome to the People's Business. Today is the 27th of April 2025 and to date, 17 homicides have been recorded in Barbados for the year. This on the heels of some 50 killings in 2024, the highest yearly figure to be recorded for the island. Last month, a 13-year-old boy was shot and killed while watching a netball match in his community, sparking outcry from a wide cross-section of society, including the church, for perpetrators to put down all weapons and walk away from crime. Tonight, we're asking, what is the church's response to crime in Barbados? To deliver some answers are the Right Reverend Michael Maxwell, Bishop of the Anglican Diocese of Barbados, and Reverend Dr. ATHILL-HORSFORD. She is the chairman of the Barbados Christian Council. That is Dr. Reverend Dr. CICELY ATHILL-HORSFORD. We also have with us Father KIRT PROSPERE. He is the youth coordinator of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Bridgetown. Lady and gentlemen, thank you for joining. We're going to take a very short commercial break and then we will dive straight into the discussion. Welcome back to the People's Business. Tonight we're discussing the church's response to crime in Barbados. My first question, the upsurge in crime in Barbados, especially gun-related crime, has been attributed primarily to social and economic factors. What role can the church play in relation to spiritual matters to deal with crime in Barbados? I'll start with you, Bishop Maxwell.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me here on this People's Business, and good night to all Barbadians and those who are viewing online. Yes, it is indeed. I believe that it is the social and economic issues that are affecting our nation, particularly in relation to our young people getting involved in criminal activity because of a lack of maybe employment. And so they find themselves hanging out with others who are like themselves, struggling to manage and make ends meet within our nation today. It is really for the church then to meet them where they are and to see how best we can encourage them to hopefully find means of employment by encouraging maybe some ways of developing their skill sets, and also in relation to maybe just to find out, what they're going through and see how best we can help them mentally. And of course, yes, spiritually, in terms of acknowledging that their lives are valued lives, and that we as a church can assist them in terms of possibly developing themselves further if there's no one else there that is able to help them at this point in time. It is true that the church, of course, will have to use many of its people in order to also be able to find ways of helping those who are struggling in their lives. And so we will hopefully be able to find business persons within our church who can possibly assist them in terms of their development. And by way then of that interaction and connection, hopefully then we will also be able to share the faith with them to enable them to really have a real grip as to what life is all about and how they can better themselves.
Okay. You've given me some very practical responses there. Are we going to come back to those later on. But I still want to start off by asking, how does the spiritual impact the other areas of people's lives that can prevent them from going down the road of crime?
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of the people's business. I want to respond to how can we do spiritually. I am a student of history, so I want to take you back in order to come forward. I believe most, if not all of, in the communities have been connected to a church, some spiritual areas, and the church is connected to the schools and the community. So there were the three-prong approach to the spiritual life, towards the normalcy of children growing up. And so you had the church, the school, and the community. Today, these three areas are not necessarily working together, each on its own, so to speak, because what you teach at church is not enforced at school, or what is taught at school is not enforced by the family, and therefore you have the disconnect. Where we are today, the churches have been working and opening up ourselves to assist these young people as best as we can, to help them to grow, because the spiritual aspect is crucial in all of this. You mentioned earlier about the 13-year-old, and it's not that he's out there. His class 4 teacher is a member of one of my congregation, so she was affected, so I had to help, and that's how it is connected all around. Spiritually, we call for prayer, but prayer alone is not the all-inclusive, the end-all. There is a need for us reaching these young people in particular, especially those with the guns. And how do we do that? Where can we go to find them? Some of them we know. Some of them we use a hands-off approach because it's dangerous for us. Others of us, we dive right into it trying to help.
I'm going to stick up in there and ask Father Prosper to respond to how does spirituality help with other areas of lives to help our young people, older people, middle-aged people who may want to go down the route of crime to say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Let me play devil's advocate for a bit.
Okay.
Do they want to change? Do they want to be in the spiritual realm? Jesus said, let those who have ears to hear, let them hear, or let them listen. And so I think within the church and with the religious, I think sometimes we try to speak too political and don't get to the crux of the matter and don't say as it is. If we say we are Christian and we are following the way of Jesus, then how do we speak to what is happening? we like to speak to the Jesus meek and humble, so we need to be humble and very political and nice, etc. But was that how Jesus was? He said what needed to be said at that particular time. And I think we as religious leaders, we as Christians, have to say as it is right now. And we have to say, one, the moral decay of the country is real. We can't sugarcoat it and add all the frills and stuff to it. We have to be, and we have to call it out for what it is. We say, where's the church in all of this? The church is there. The church is in the community. On my drive from Ashton Hall to, let's say, Westmoreland, the stoplights in Westmoreland, there's about 20 churches. And that's that short drive. The church is there. But people, some people, they don't want to get involved, right? Again, we ask, why is the church not involved? I say, we are there.
You are there, but what are you doing to reach the people? If they don't want to come, how are you
how
trying to
we
reach
going to
them?
reach them? All right, so I'm going to get there. So we go into the community. I said earlier, as we see the political parties going out canvassing, right? We need to be the foot soldiers, right, for Christ, and trying to bring them in. So from my perspective, myself and another confrere, he's in St. James, right? We are starting to think and build programs for, especially for young men, camps, especially during summer, because the parents are asking for something for the youngsters, especially young boys, to participate in, right? So those camps will be that to help build morality, right? To give them some sort of a spiritual outlook for life, right? So these are things that we can start doing, right? But we have to be able to, or be given the permission to go into schools, etc., so we can build these programs up.
Who do you need permission from?
Well, from principals, from the ministry, etc.
Have you been asking?
Well, like I said, we are now building on those programs, trying to form them. So that's the next step, to write letters to the ministry, to the schools in the area. So in my area is what? There's CP, there's Alexandra, and there is St. James Secondary. I can't remember the name it is now. You know, I went there. So these are the schools that, especially the secondary schools, that we need to target. We also need to target the primary schools as well, because I think, you know, for some of the older ones, I'm not saying we're going to give up on them, but for some of them, we have lost them. And the only way we can start to build back up the community is start from the young ones and bring them up.
Are you giving up? You've said
If I'm giving up,
that we have lost some of these older children?
You see, you missed the first part. I'm not saying that we are giving up on them. But I think, right, that we've lost them to a certain extent. And as I said in the beginning, we have to be real. We can't sugarcoat these things, right? We have to see it for what it is, right? And we call a spade, right? And then we work in the community, but we have to target the younger ones and bring them up. I work with some of the youth in my parish, and to see how they are, it is very difficult because they leave church and they go back home into their communities and their homes, and the culture that they live in, you know, it then roots out what you have tried to instill in them. So then where do we stand? Yes, we keep plowing, but I can only see them sometimes on Sundays, right? Sometimes they come up with all kind of excuses why they're not in church on Sundays. But again, why haven't you come to church? What does the church have for me? Like tangibly, right? I can offer you salvation, but they don't want to hear that, right? They want something. So we gotta really work hard spiritually, right? To try to rein them in, but honestly, it can be difficult.
We have a caller on the line. Let's hear what this caller, our first caller for tonight, has to say. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, hi, good night. Yes, hi, good night. Yes, my name is Kamal Mason. I am from the Wycliffe Bubble Transfers, Barbados. I'm their Bubble Club coordinator. I have two questions for the panel, please. My first question is, what can we do? We know that the First Estate has been long held in Barbados to have a privileged position. But in terms of making it a better position, in terms of merging with the Fourth Estate to make the church more smart, in terms of a media campaign where you get the gospel out there, so that means using like what you're doing right now in terms of this with the CBC and this kind of thing. My final question is, what can also be done now that the church has been able to grow much bigger and be more, have a lot more aspects in terms of its functionality and its specific use over time, ministry and these kind of things. It has really grown. What are you going to do to include the stuff like the ordination, the laying on of hands for these particular youth, and what are you going to do to make the careers in the church more, so that more people can get out of the aspect of crime in society and get into the church to grow it more? Thank you very much. God bless.
If I could maybe respond to the latter part. In terms of the Anglican Church in particular, we recognize again, because of the challenges that are out there in society, that we are actually moving now maybe to some level of ministry that I believe is very much within the Roman Catholic Church in terms of what we call distinctive deacons. And by distinctive deacons, we are referring to those who are not what we call transitional deacons who will become priests, but remain deacons in terms of community service, specifically connecting community issues and addressing community issues. So when the caller would have mentioned about maybe having more ordinations, I'm assuming you mean more personnel in terms of ordained ministers. We are actually into that of training and preparing distinctive deacons. So they're doing courses such as mediation, because of course you recognize in terms of conflict resolution and so forth that is a very big thing out there in terms of anger management. And so these deacons are being specifically trained in these areas so that when they go into the community, if there are families, dysfunctional families, if there are issues that they may encounter some young people that are having some challenges with school life or whatever, that they will be able then to respond to them positively, to encourage them, and also encourage the families to maybe work a little better in terms of, as I said, in terms of bringing some level of mediation between conflicts between the family members. And so we believe that this is, because I believe that a lot of our young people, for example, are finding the blocks because of dysfunctions within their families. So they're not comfortable staying home. They prefer to go online, and then of course then they're influenced a lot more by their peers, and then at times find themselves in some trouble. So we believe if we can help to build up family life in particular, and this is something that I believe our churches need to maybe encourage a lot more in terms of emphasizing family structures and how best families can live together. And if I may return to the question that you would have raised in relation to spirituality, because it was phrased a little bit different going on in terms of how does this spirituality help an individual to avoid those pitfalls. And I believe, of course, through spirituality, you get to know exactly who you are as a child of God. And by knowing who you are as a child of God and knowing the value of life, not just your life, but life in the community, then that will encourage you, of course, never to take up a gun, because again, you're reminded that all are created by God, all are loved by God, and so I should not be trying to harm any of God's creation, including my own life, right? I mean, so for example, taking drugs, know that that's harmful for my body, that my body is a temple of God's Holy Spirit. So that spirituality, I believe, and that understanding, that connection, that relationship with God, the divine, will enable me as an individual to know what is right from what is wrong. And so I believe that would help in terms of avoiding the various pitfalls that are out there as a young person.
Thank you. We're taking a break and we're coming right back with more of the People's Business. Welcome back to the People's Business. Tonight we're discussing the church's response to crime in Barbados. We have a caller on the line. Go ahead, caller.
Yeah, good night, Miss Russell, to you on the panel.
Good night.
I feel that the church we have to get more proactive than reactive. I think the church was more reactive in this situation. They waited to act too long. I believe that they should have come out and standing should be kept solemn. That's the first thing that the church that was speaking about. I think they have a few of the pastors that are senators inside the house, and the organization should have come out and form, even if they had march and get Barbados back to standing being solemn and Holy Week. That should be gospel fest. And they would cut out some of this lot of violence and thing in the country. And what they're calling Sunday school now, the church should have been out speaking about that. If they keep those kind of things, what the young people going to gravitate to? You know, so the church got to be more proactive than reactive.
Thank you, caller. Reverend CICELY, I'm going to ask you to respond to that because you're here as chairman of the Barbados Christian Council. You're representing all the churches in Barbados. What is your response?
I'm representing a few member churches. There are about 10, 11 of us.
Okay.
There is the BEA, the Barbados Evangelical Association.
Okay.
We collaborate, we work together on a number of things. The church has been proactive, not in the way the caller would anticipate. For example, I know that we have been, the Barbados Christian Council, have been working with the Ministry of Education, getting the pastors, the parish priests who are closest to primary schools, secondary schools, to get in there and work with the children, because the link that I spoke about earlier has been broken. So we are trying to establish and reestablish that link. I can tell you in my own personal experience where the church is close to the school, there is a school service every other Thursday where the children are with me and I do almost an hour with them. Whenever there's a crisis at the school, I'm there. And there are many pastors and priests who are called in. So the church is not that we are reacting to the crime and what is happening. Of course, we have to react to that, but we have been working before and we continue to work. We continue to be proactive in all of this. You mentioned the statistics, 17 homicides so far. Yes, it is alarming, and 17 lives have been lost. And we are angry about that, literally angry. It brings out the anger in us of 17 souls have been cut short. What are we doing? Yeah, we can shout from the mountaintop, put down the guns, but because of the other things that are happening around, like for example, one young man says in the hearing of a few of us that he is saving up his money because he can rent a gun, and when he rents that gun, he's going after his stepfather.
Hold that thought, please. We have a caller on the line. Caller, kindly go ahead.
Yes. I want to agree with Father KIRT about working with the youth. You train them today, because I'm a school teacher, and when they go back to their environment, they go back to the same behavior. My solution for this is one of my solutions. First, I think that we, the church, and when I say the church, the people, need to go to the mountain, okay? We cannot wait on people to come to the church. We have to go and look for our sheep, find the sheep, and deal with them. Secondly, things like Holy Week and all of that, it should come from the top. The people who say yes to all of these things that go on in Lent, it should be no. And until we put morals back in place, we are going to be spinning top in mud. Because for me, for Lent, I don't think we should have all these Sunday school fetes, vibes cartel, etc., etc. At the end of the day, you're telling me send the children back to church, but yet you're allowing these types of activities to come in. So, you know, we got to get to the root cause of this thing. And I think that we as church, we need to go in to the nooks and the crannies. I'm talking about on foot soldiers. That's what, to me, church is, okay? And I am saying until we do that, we are going to be talking about this until 2030. So that's my feeling about it.
Now, CICELY, Reverend Dr. CICELY ATHILL-HORSFORD. The last thing you said before we took that call was quite alarming.
Yes.
You said that you've heard a young person planning to buy a gun to kill someone.
Rent a gun. It is one of the real things in the society. So we need to find out where these guns are. How can we get them off the street? How can we entice those who have the guns to give them up? It's, I'm not sure that I am bold enough to say, hey, tell me where you can go and get a gun so I can go.
Why are you not bold enough? Perhaps this is what that previous caller before the last might have been alluding to when he's saying the church is not being proactive.
Okay, so All right. I'm just, while I'm thinking, I'm talking, I'm thinking of my own experience coming out of one of my areas, not in Barbados though, where a young man came to my office and says to me, I want to change my life. And so I sat on the steps outside, not knowing who he was until I engaged him in conversation. So it is saying not only that I need to go out, but I also make myself available to listen to the complaints of these young persons in particular. Because if I go back to the incident where the young man saying, I'm going to save my money so I can rent a gun, I need to hear from him why you want to do that, how much it costs, where are you getting the money from, this sort of thing. So the listening ear, and I probably can be the go-between or the person who would move him away from that, his end goal, to another.
So you haven't yet actually spoken with this particular young man, but you're thinking that this is a role that you can
This
play.
is what we are doing.
Father Prosper, you seem to be a little more outspoken, or at least it seems as if you would like to be more outspoken on the part of the church, and you are working with young people. Is the church being proactive enough?
The church has been proactive, very proactive. And I'm going to speak on the Catholic Church, whereas I remember, so I've always been in church, right? And I remember we had an organization formed called Carry Youth. And that group, we formed young people from Curacao straight up to the Bahamas. We invited them every year, and it was around June 4th, which is CARICOM week in that area. And we had discussions on everything dealing from politics to youth. One of the things that we also did, I remember this very clear, was Father Clement Paul at the time. We organized a motorcade. It was around Christmas on gun violence. And what it was about was that the parents will not buy toy guns for their children because we believe that that was what caused that upsurge, right? But as we drove along and as we heard, it is nonsense. You can't tell me what to buy for my child. You can't tell me what to give to my child. It's just a toy.
We have a caller on the line. Hold that thought. Caller, kindly go ahead.
Hello, good night to everyone.
Good night.
Right. Within society, what is happening, we have double standard in which the youth are confused. Because the Easter period, which is sacred to us, the church was protesting against an event that was held at a particular location. Did they listen to the church? No. But the question is now, what's the church doing? The church is still going up there to invite people into the pews. However, persons have choices. And what we see something even on our national television by some of the artists is very degrading. Now, how can we have a society in which we are saying to the church, you need to do more, but on the other hand, you having snippets on your television where we are seeing some of the most lewdest behavior. So the youth is caught in a crossbind. What message are we sending to the youth? The issue in Barbados is a societal problem. It involves both the church and the home, so that we can address the issue that we are currently faced with. Because we can't point finger at the church. If we as a people can come together to understand that we have a genuine problem, Let's sit down and reason. What is the best step? What is the best approach for we to take to get this problem solved? Then we will see some sort of results at the end. And it involves the church, the home, and society, because it's within the home that the children are taught, either right or wrong. And then when they go in society, is that peer pressure that drives them sometimes to do these things. Sometimes it can be lack of love. Sometimes it can be lack of a father figure. Sometimes it can be dysfunctional families. And then the church will come in to play a role, but the church must be also be supported by the state to help solve these issues that we are currently having in Barbados. Thank you.
Father Paul, I will let you continue making your comment. The last caller seemed to be on the same page with much of what's already been shared here tonight.
And as I say, as he rightly said, we all have a choice, right? And when I'm listening to what is going on in society right now, with the violence and stuff, and where is the church, etc., etc. As I'm listening to that, I'm like, we like the Israelites. Because when the Israelites were in Egypt, they were saying, we want freedom. God needs to come and save us, bring us out. Moses went, brought them out of Egypt, and they were happy, they praised God, etc. It was good for a period of time. When they got comfortable and everything died down or what, they started doing the nonsense again. Right? And God said, listen, I'm going to punish one of you. Then they got punished. We have done bad. We need God. God comes, does what he has to do, and then they went back doing the nonsense again. This is the same thing we experience in our society, where the breakdown of morals continue to be prevalent. But we don't want to speak about that because, well, everybody got rights to do what they want to do until it starts to affect them, right? And then we where's the church? Where's the church? Again, I keep saying the church is here. We're doing things, as Bishop Michael said, These are things that have been taught about the person, right? So if you look at the dignity of the person, right, the human person, then you will see that person, right, and you would not want to take a life, right? But when you disregard, all of that, then it is whatever, right? And so society, one, government, and the church need to work together continuously, not just when things, there's upheaval in the country, but even when things are quiet and nice, we still need to continue to work together. But when you have things happening, again, I come back to Clement Paul because he's the one that I grew up listening to and being in his presence, right? So the motorcade on gun violence and toy guns, etc., that was a big thing. Now, I remember in my teens, heard Father Paul talking about the moral decay of the country and how we as a people, how we live our lives. Now, in the church, there's something called the domestic church. What is the domestic church? It is how your parents raise you within the home, because your parents are your first teachers. So if there's no moral upbringing, if there's no spiritual upbringing, then what are we doing? All right? And so we have to also focus on that. What are the parents doing? And when Father Paul spoke about the moral decay within the homes, what did they say to him? They said, he's a priest. What he know about family life? And this was the quote. I remember it then, as it was yesterday, they said, stay out of our homes. Stay in the church. So only when things happen like this, they want the church. They don't want the church when things are good. Stay out of our homes. So then, if we are being asked as religious and church to stay out of the homes, then when we get to this point, what do you want us to do? And I just talk in real because that is what it is. And so we have to then to try then and tackle, or I don't know how we're going to get into the homes, right? Because now people are saying we are not religious, we are spiritual. And we are spiritual because whatever I believe in, whatever floats my boat, it goes. Because when we are religious, there's rules, there's regulations, etc., that we need to follow, and people want to do what they want to do. And so then the struggle continues. So that is something that we have to try and work on.
We're taking a short commercial break right now, and then we're coming back for more of the People's Business. Welcome back to the People's Business. Tonight we're discussing the church's role in dealing with crime in Barbados. In the studio with us is Bishop Michael Maxwell, and we have Reverend Dr. CICELY ATHILL-HORSFORD, and we also have Father KIRT PROSPERE. We have a caller on the line. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, are you here? Are you hearing me?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question here for Bishop Maxwell, right? I want to ask him if he thinks that the removal of religious education, especially from those primary schools, has created a spiritual disconnect for those little youngsters, because that is when they would buy that God story from you. But attacking them now they don't want that now. But at that young age, you created a spiritual disconnect with them, and you kicked the door wide open for all of the other things, like the gun violence, and because they're not getting it at school, they're not getting it anywhere now at all. So they are disconnected spiritually completely. Now, what else are they going to do but foolishness? This one is for you, Bishop.
I believe, yes, that maybe the removal of religious education, although I understand that they do moral education there, could very well have an impact, yes, on that decline in morals and behavior of our young students. However, I do believe that hopefully through the church's connection with the primary schools, because I do believe that there are churches that still have the opportunity to actually connect with primary schools, that hopefully at least through the morning assemblies that they have, that hopefully that can still have some level of impact upon their lives. What I would say though is that we deal with primary school students, but I'm also having a concern with the secondary school students, because very often there we don't have that level of religious assemblies. Yes, we do have assemblies, but again, wondering if the opportunity for our clergy can also be an opportunity for them to come into our secondary schools. So it's a continuation of what was happening from their primary schools, because very often, of course, the environment in the secondary schools is a lot different, especially when our children go through the adolescence. And so I think that even there, that there should be some level of continuation of interaction between the church and the secondary schools. But I do believe that we can try to curb the issue by, once again, ensuring that all of our primary schools have their morning assemblies and have that religious instruction or guidance in terms of their faith, and again, recognizing who they are and who God calls them to be as they grow up within His Word, laying that foundation even there and then. Because some of our young ones don't have any other religious instruction outside of possibly going to school, where they know that they have to go to school. And so it will be, it is wise that we can probably ensure that we seek to have that, if it is not there, have it reintroduced within our primary schools to assist our young minds, to help them develop and be able, as I mentioned earlier, once they have that spiritual connection with their God, then they have that foundation laid that they know how to resist the evil one and know what is right from what is wrong.
We do have another caller on the line, so I'm going to let this caller pose the question. Go ahead, caller.
Hello, good evening. My name is Roger Husbands. I wanted to weigh in on the discussion because the church is doing stuff. I represent the church as well, and there are many other partly churches out there in terms of organizations that have been started by the church or by Christians who are out there doing a fantastic job in the community. Matter of fact, when it first started, I was the one to come out to say, well, hey, this is happening in our nation. We do have gangs, we do have violence going on. Guns are on the rental, person out there renting guns. The problem is becoming bad, and people still did not understand, or people still did not believe that it was happening. So the church did sound the alarm. However, I think that the solution now to this issue is mentorship. If we can train people within our churches to help people to learn how to mentor, because the youngsters out there on the block are dependent on each other, and young men who are going through issues in home or in their community need to have an outlet that they can go to someone to speak to somebody. So what we are doing now is approaching the churches and saying, hey, we need people to be trained as mentors. We need little churches around the community to become hubs that youngsters can run to. And the church has the infrastructure, they have the building, they have the space to allow counseling, allow mentoring, allow these kind of services to be in their spaces, because the churches are in the community, but people are not trained properly in those in the churches to handle some of these matters. So I think going forward, the church needs to use this as one of the main solutions towards helping this problem. Now again, based upon my information, I sound the alarm, so we hope and see what happens from here on. But that's my contribution to the discussion. Thank you.
CICELY, you were about to make a comment before we took that call.
A couple of comments, but I agree with Roger Husbands, the caller. The thing is that we are there in the community, and the churches have opened their doors for anybody or persons to come. Most of the pastors and priests are trained, and so we are willing to offer programs, mentorship. I wanted to go back a little, especially when Bishop mentioned about the primary school and the secondary school. I was talking to some secondary school children, and they said they were going to school late. So I wondered, why are you going to school late? You make the bus pass. They said, well, we don't want to be at the assembly. Okay, that's where problems are. Okay? So if they chose not to be where the religious instructions are given, where we have gone out of our way to assist the schools, then you see where the problem is. I want to say that children today, young people today, do not have the skills, the social skills, the other skills, life skills, like we who are adults now. We learn them from church. A number of us learn our life skills from the church. But now, we said to our children, because our parents grabbed us, dragged us, pushed us, make sure that we go to church, we do not want our children to go through that. So you allow the children to choose. The caller said children have choices. And yes, they choose not to. Ask the number of parents who are in church. Where are the children? Oh, they're home sleeping. They're tired for the whole week. And they had all these things. They rob these children of the life skills that you learn at church. You are taught the 10 Commandments. And if you love God, if you love God the way He asks us to, then you know that you love your neighbor as yourself. And if you love your neighbor as yourself, you don't steal from your neighbor, you don't lie, you don't do all the other stuff that are there, and you don't kill. So the commandments, they taught you as an individual, and this is how you live. You are taught how to love. And the kind of love that you have, so that you can differentiate the love that you would get on the block with the love that you get at home, with the love that you get from your neighbor.
We're taking a very short commercial break, and we're coming right back with more of The People's Business. Welcome back to The People's Business. Tonight, crime, the church's response. I've been hearing from 3 clerics here all night, and I'm hearing that the church is doing its best, but society, government perhaps, they are not necessarily working with the church so that we can all get the best outcome for our citizens. What really is the solution? I know, Bishop Maxwell, you have suggested a gun amnesty. Do you think that will really work?
I believe it will. The only challenge, of course, is that I was also hearing the fact that, persons will be concerned about if they give up their gun, then they'll be at risk of somebody shooting them. But I think there are other ways outside of the gun amnesty, and I go back to what the church can possibly do, or probably to assist in terms of hopefully trying to curb some of the violence or even future violence with our young ones. One thing that our diocese is thinking of is primarily in relation to working again with the schools, through the schools to connect with families in particular, and especially families of those who are considered to be on the poverty line, those who are at risk, in terms of where the teachers and the principals can inform us as to who are the ones that they believe that will need some assistance from the church, so that the churches within that particular community can connect with those families to, as one of the callers mentioned about being a mentor, to assist those families if they're having challenges or difficulties. And so I believe that besides the gun amnesty, there are other things that I believe that the church itself needs to get involved with. I remember when the government was using the program of debushing and had a lot of young men employed, and then after that was, well, I guess things got a bit tight then, and then that was cut off. And for me, I felt it was at that point in time that the crime started to rise again, because these persons were not occupied and working. And so I have been seeking through my church to see if we can make available agricultural land so that we can have hopefully some of these same young men making a living through the land. Not just debushing, but actually planting crops and being able to sell crops and so forth. And we're hoping that when we have that available, and this is where again we can work with the government, and I know that for sure the church's trustees, our trustees have been in contact with the government, the Ministry of Agriculture, in terms of getting particularly a project done in the St. Andrew vicinity. Somehow it's taken longer than I really would anticipate, and I'm sorry about that, but I believe that we need to really work a little faster, more quickly in terms of getting these things materialized, because in the meantime, these young men are just out there not doing anything. And so we need to assist them, and I think very often we are taking too long to really respond to the needs of our people.
As we wrap up very quickly now, because our time has slipped away,
Yes,
1 minute each for Reverend CICELY and Father PROSPERE. My director is saying 20 seconds each.
Okay. I just want to agree quickly with the last caller on the mentorship programs. I have actually 2 of my parishioners who have worked out a mentorship program, so we're looking to work on that, and also working with the St. Peter Parish Independence Committee. They have also that suggestion. So, looking to work with the community and within the church to see how we can build on that.
Some of the areas that we are looking at, and member churches and my own denomination, we have sports initiative, because we know there is a transformative power of sports. We have after-school programs. We have resource centers and care centers, so that we can help these persons looking at themselves, taking care of themselves, and also how they relate to the rest of the community, rest of society.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Tonight, we were discussing the church's response to crime, and we want to say thanks to Bishop Michael Maxwell, Reverend Dr. CICELY ATHILL-HORSFORD, Father KIRT PROSPERE. Thank you so much. Viewers, thank you for watching. And on behalf of our News and Current Affairs Department and the crew, I'm Stacey Russell. See you again soon for more of The People's Business.